Premier John Brumby today announced the government's response to the remaining bushfire recommendations following weeks of community consultation. I spoke to the Premier earlier. Mr Brumby, welcome to Stateline.
Thanks, Josephine.
The one recommendation that you have rejected is the retreat and resettlement option. That is the voluntary buyback of those properties in the very high fire risk areas. Do you accept that some of these areas should not have people living in them?
I know the Commission highlighted a particular road in King Lake where lives were lost on February 7th. The fact is that many people after the fires on February 7th wanted to go back and to rebuild on that road, and there are many similar roads in King Lake and other places like Marysville that are just as dangerous, just as forested, just as wooded. And how you would ever make a judgment about who would be in and who would be out, I don't think you could objectively do. And then, of course, you've got an issue, Josephine, where if you did have a buyback scheme, you could have 5 people in a road of 10 people who said, yes, please buy me out, and by them leaving, their house being cleared and the block being left, it would probably actually pose a higher fire danger risk to those remaining than had neighbours been on either side of them. So in all of the consultations we had, nobody could explain to us how this could practically and objectively work, and that's why we rejected it.
Mr Brumby, another recommendation that you are accepting is the scrapping of the fire services levy to be replaced with a property-based tax. How much will it be and who will be paying?
Well, we've got a process in place which will complete with a white paper that will finish next year in March. We have said that it will be revenue neutral, that it will be progressive, that is, the more your property is worth, the more you will pay, and thirdly, that we will provide a pensioner concession for low-income earners. Beyond that, you can't make predictions, I think, about who will pay or how much. So this levy will be raising somewhere between $600 and $800 million per annum. What you've got to appreciate, I think, is about 10% of the population at the moment isn't insured. So you've got, going forward, 100 people will be paying that levy instead of 90. So the burden on average on everybody should be a little lower.
You've clearly changed your position on that, because in Parliament I think you described it as a disgraceful policy. What changed your view?
What I've always said is that I've rejected a flat tax, and I've always rejected a flat tax. But we've had the fire services levy now for decades in our state, and while that policy has been in place, I've supported it, as you would expect a responsible government to do. But we've been confronted with a recommendation by the Royal Commission, which we established. It made this recommendation. They were fairly emphatic about it. We've reviewed our position, and I think we've made, on balance, the right decision.
Mr Premier, let's move on to the issue of power lines. You say you've partly accepted the recommendation on power lines. How many will be put underground or aerial bundled?
I can't answer that. What we've said is that we'll focus on areas which are the most extreme fire risk. We've put some money aside to do that. But the issue here, Josephine, is that the Commission recommended that over a period of time all, and that was the word they used, all swirl lines, which are the single wire earth return, and all of the 22 kV lines be undergrounded. The reality is the cost to do that is pretty close to $20 billion. If you did that, even over a 10-year or longer period, everybody's power bills would double every 4 or 5 years continually over the next 20. I didn't find any support for that policy in consultations across the state. What I did find strong support for was what we've done, and that is toughening up the maintenance requirements, toughening up the inspection requirements, toughening up the penalties on power companies that don't properly maintain their lines. And there was also support for looking in a very targeted way if there are extreme high-risk areas where power lines can be successfully undergrounded, then we should look at that and require companies to do it.
On the issue of fuel burns, Mr Premier, you say you'll reach the target set by the Commission of 385,000 hectares a year. The AWU says that's impossible unless you employ 600 DSC firefighters. Is that correct?
So what we've set out today is we've announced it's a huge amount of money. It's nearly $400 million extra over the next 4 years to lift the burns from 150,000 a year up to 275,000. So we're at 150, we'll lift to 275, and then in 275 we'll then lift in the 2 years after that up to 385. In terms of firefighters, I haven't seen the claims of the AWU. I do know that we've employed, as of today, 170 further permanent DSE firefighters, plus a further 231 seasonal firefighters. So that's a big increase in employment so that we can get on with the job and get the increase in fuel reduction burning done.
Finally, Mr Premier, can Victorians have confidence that you'll implement what you say you will, given that some of the interim recommendation that you were promising to implement haven't been done?
I wouldn't agree with that. If you look at the Monitor's report, remember the interim report from the Commission suggests that we establish a monitor to oversee the implementation. The monitor is the former Chief Commissioner, Neil Comery. He reported, he said we'd made strong progress. The Commission acknowledged as much in their final report, but some of the recommendations that were made in the interim report you can't do straight off. They will take some months or some years to fully implement. But we are making progress on all of those. I think, as I've said, the Commission itself acknowledges of that, and we will be appointing a monitor to oversee the implementation of the final report, because I think the Parliament and the people of Victoria want to know that what we have said we will do, and so they will get regular progress reports from the implementation monitor.
Mr Premier, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Josephine.